the line with us from the DNC is Terry O'Neill, feminist attorney, law professor, social justice activist, president of the National Organization for Women, now since 2009. Now.org is the website. Terry O'Neill, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us. First of all, before we get into the issues, it's been a while since Now has been in the news, or at least that I've noticed. What are you all up to these days, and how's it going?
Oh, we're doing really well. We just celebrated our 50th anniversary last month, and I'm really thrilled at the direction that Now is taking. Leading up to the 50th anniversary, for about 4 years, we started looking at our structure. We realized that women's rights are being dramatically pushed back at the state legislative level, especially. So we've been trying to figure out how to empower our state organizations and make things more flexible to get more to really stop bad legislation at the state level and start promoting good stuff. One of the things I'm most proud of for my organization is when we restructured the organization last year, we changed our statement of purpose. The original statement of purpose was to take action to bring women into the mainstream of American society. We feel like the idea of women's equality has become very mainstream, but we also realize that women who look like me have done very well since Now was created, but women who don't look like me have not. So our new statement of purpose is to take action through intersectional grassroots organizing to promote feminist ideals and lead societal change. So that is what we are now doing, is promoting, we are creating national action campaigns that put marginalized women at the center of our analysis.
Presumably marginalized women, women of color, women who are immigrants, women who are of non-mainstream religions, Muslims, for example.
Right. Low-income women, women with disabilities, women in immigrant communities, and LGBTQIA individuals.
That's great. That is great. It's such a great organization. I've literally followed your organization since its creation. I'm an old fart. I guess if you're 50 years old, I was 15 years old when you were started, but I remember when Now started. And you talk about at the state level. I was just reading a fairly long piece. I'm going to turn into a long rant tomorrow about what Mike Pence was doing in Indiana against women. And not only was what he was doing in Indiana, he was actually using state taxpayer funds to pay his either Secretary of State or AG or whatever, Lieutenant General, somebody, one of those men, I'm sure, to travel to other states to evangelize them for similar god-awful laws, like if you have a miscarriage, you must have a funeral while you're grieving the loss of your child.
No, I know. It's absolutely hideous. And yeah, that miscarriage, you must have a funeral law. Actually, having a funeral for every single fetus effectively criminalizes medication abortions, right, which are done so early in the pregnancy term that you can't have a funeral for it. I mean, nobody understands how women's bodies. I mean, Mike Pence doesn't understand how many women's bodies work. Right. It's really completely outrageous. But I think more importantly, you see the impact of Mike Pence's and other extremists' web of restrictions on women's access to reproductive health care. Where does it lead? Well, it leads to tragedies like Purvi Patel. I don't know if you're familiar with her story. I
talked about her at some length yesterday, yes.
Exactly.
The woman who is in jail on a 56-year term, as I recall, 40 years in prison is, in Indiana for having had a late-term, apparently, miscarriage.
Yes, and it was, an appeals court, by the way, just ruled that her conviction was unlawful and I think unconstitutional. Yeah, it still has to go to the Supreme Court, so we'll just have to wait and see. But that young woman, at every step of the way, she had no access. She didn't have access to sex education in the schools. She didn't have access to family planning clinics in her community. Why? Because they're being defunded in the name of anti-abortion. But you defund those clinics, you are defunding access to such simple things as breast exams and cervical cancer screening and STD screenings and HIV screenings and so forth.
And early term abortion.
Oh, of course, and early term abortion. But in the name of criminalizing abortion or stopping all abortions, in fact, what happens is women's access to the range of reproductive health services is cut off, and you get tragedies like Purvi's.
Right, and late term miscarriages, late term abortions, and all kinds of other disasters.
Right.
This is amazing. You talked, Tim Kaine, he has consistently championed universal pre-K, sensible gun regulation, comprehensive immigration reform, and is an unwavering opponent of the death penalty. These are all issues within your bailiwick?
Yes. Actually, the death penalty, we do have a resolution on it, but we don't. We work through coalitions a lot. But yeah, now is not a fan of the death penalty. So yes, but the gun violence very much within our ambit. If there is a gun in a home where there is also domestic violence or domestic abuse, there is, I believe, a 5 times higher likelihood that there will be a homicide in that home.
There's also a 500% greater probability of suicide.
Oh yes, right, exactly.
So this is not good stuff. Comprehensive immigration reform. How would you frame that as a feminist issue?
Oh my goodness. So I was so pleased to do this action with an amazing woman named Pramila Jayapal, who is currently running for Congress.
She was on our program day before yesterday.
I know, she's amazing. I'm such a huge fan of hers, and she organized immigrant women to engage in nonviolent civil disobedience. So we all got arrested together, arguing for immigration reform that treats immigrant women fairly. And let me just give you an example. Ask yourself, why is it that 70% of immigrant women come to this country on a family visa, not a work visa? Well, the answer turns out that you've got a ton of visas for STEM occupations, but women have a really hard time getting into those jobs because in their home countries, they've got discrimination in education and employment, and they don't have the resumes to support getting those STEM occupations.
STEM being science and technology and
engineering and math. Yeah, exactly. And so they're coming, 70% come on as family members, not allowed to look for work, not allowed to have any employment, so they have no economic independence, which makes them uniquely vulnerable, or at least more vulnerable, to domestic violence and other types of exploitation. So, for example, one of the things my organization is doing from an intersectional perspective, the board really wants to work on the Equal Rights Amendment. And we said, so what would the Equal Rights Amendment do for marginalized groups of women? Well, we think that the Equal Rights Amendment, we could use that to force the United States government to change the immigration laws to perhaps open up more visas for occupations where women predominate, as well as in STEM.
Yeah, that is great. And universal pre-K, you talked about Tim Kaine being a supporter of that. I'm assuming Hillary Clinton is as well.
Yes, of course. Yes, she's definitely a fan of that, and so is now. We're actually, in terms of the educational work that we're doing right now, we are obviously we're supporting our coalition partners that work on universal pre-K, but we are beginning a national action campaign around the sex abuse to prison pipeline, right? Because that's what you see when you put a gender lens on the school to prison pipeline. What you see is that girls are being disciplined and punished and pushed out of school very, very much after having experienced sexual trauma. I'm talking about in high schools and middle schools, in the public schools, especially these so-called zero tolerance schools where you have school resource officers, militarized police officers in the schools, and to pay for that, they laid off the social workers and the counselors who might be able to provide trauma-informed services to girls who have experienced sexual assault. So we're trying to, again, what we're doing is utilizing Title IX, which has very much been used to get women into professional schools like law school and medical school and so forth, and also athletics, and also now is being used appropriately for women who've been assaulted on college campuses. Now, that's 4-year college campuses, which nationwide are predominantly white. What we want to do is use Title IX and say these girls in these high schools and middle schools who've experienced sexual assault and are not getting the services from the schools, are getting punished in the schools for acting out as a result of their trauma, they're not getting an equal educational opportunity. And we want the Title IX coordinator in every school district to develop a program to help those girls.
That's absolutely brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. Terry O'Neill, a feminist attorney, law professor, social justice activist, and perhaps most importantly, the president of NOW, the National Organization for Women, since 2009. That's pretty impressive. Terry, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate talking to you.
Thanks. Great talking with you. Now.org is the website.
To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.